You've probably had that moment where your mind just doesn't cooperate. You sit down to focus, maybe read something, maybe finish a task, and within minutes your attention fractures into 10 different directions. Nothing dramatic happens, just a quiet sense that your brain isn't as sharp as it should be, and no clear reason why. So you do what most people do. You look for something simple, something external that promises to fix an internal problem without requiring you to understand it. A supplement, an app, a routine, something that feels structured enough to trust, but effortless enough to adopt. That's where products like the Brain Song enter the picture. A 12-minute audio, positioned as a way to activate your brainwaves and support something called BDNF, which is often described as a kind of fertilizer for the brain. It sounds scientific, specific, and contained. Press play, wait 12 minutes, and something in your brain improves. But that framing hides something important. Not because it's false, but because it simplifies a system that is anything but simple. The idea behind the Brain Song is rooted in brainwave entrainment. The premise is that your brain operates across different frequency patterns, and that external stimuli like sound can influence those patterns. In this case, the focus is on gamma waves, which are often associated with attention, memory, and higher-level processing. There is research suggesting that certain brainwave states correlate with cognitive performance. There is also research around BDNF, a protein linked to neuroplasticity, learning, and brain health. The connection between the two is where things become less concrete and more interpretive. What the Brain Song does is take that emerging connection and package it into a repeatable experience. You listen to a carefully designed audio that uses specific sound patterns, with the intention of nudging your brain toward a gamma-dominant state. Not forcing it, not controlling it, but influencing it. And that distinction matters more than the marketing suggests, because what you're really buying here is not a result. You're buying a method, a stimulus, a structured input that may or may not produce a noticeable effect depending on variables the product doesn't control, like your baseline mental state, your environment, your expectations, and your consistency. This is where most people misread products like this. They treat them as outcomes instead of tools, as if pressing play guarantees a cognitive upgrade, when in reality it introduces a condition that might support one. The appeal is obvious. It's passive. It's contained. It fits into a 12-minute window, which makes it feel manageable in a world where everything competes for attention. But that same simplicity is also a trade-off. It removes friction, but it also removes visibility. You don't see what's happening. You don't measure it directly. You rely on subtle shifts, like feeling slightly more focused, slightly calmer, slightly more present. And those shifts are difficult to isolate from everything else that influences your brain on a daily basis. There's also a deeper layer that rarely gets discussed. The more you rely on external systems to regulate internal states, the less you develop awareness of how those states are formed in the first place. Not because the tool is harmful, but because it abstracts the process. It turns something dynamic into something procedural. That doesn't make the Brain Song ineffective. It just places it in a different category than most people expect. It's closer to guided input than transformation, closer to a support mechanism than a solution. And for some people, that's enough. If you already understand your cognitive patterns and you're looking for a consistent way to create a specific mental environment, a tool like this can act as a trigger, a way to signal your brain that it's time to shift into a different mode. But if you're expecting a standalone fix, something that overrides everything else without context, you're likely to miss what it actually offers. The interesting part is not whether it works in isolation, but how it changes your relationship with focus. Whether it makes you more dependent on external cues, or more aware of internal ones. Whether it becomes a crutch or a bridge. Because there's a quiet pattern in products like this. They promise convenience, but what they really provide is structure. And structure only works if you recognize it as such. At $39 with a digital delivery and a 90-day refund window, the barrier to entry is low. That's intentional. It positions the product as something easy to try, easy to adopt, and easy to justify. But the real cost isn't the price. It's the expectation you attach to it. If you approach it as a shortcut, you'll likely be disappointed. If you approach it as a controlled input in a system you're still learning to understand, it becomes more useful. And that shift changes everything. You stop asking if it works, and start asking how it fits. Because in the end, the difference between someone who consumes solutions and someone who builds systems is subtle, but decisive. One looks for answers outside. The other looks for leverage inside. If you're curious enough to test where this fits into your own routine, there's a link below. Just don't use it as an answer. Use it as a variable.